They bit off more than they could chew. That old saying couldn't be truer for what you're about to hear, because when the HOA came after me with threats, intimidation, and even muscle, they never expected my response, or how far I was willing to go to protect my home, my freedom, and my family. Imagine this. It's a quiet evening on my rural property. My German Shepherd is at the edge of the yard, ears perked, growling low. I step outside with my shotgun, and my stomach sinks. 3 men I don't recognize are standing at the end of my driveway, hands shoved in their pockets, staring at my house like they own it. One of them smirks and says, "Karen sent us. You're gonna regret not joining." That's the moment everything changed. That was the night my life, my land, and my peace were put to the test. All because I refused to sign a dotted line and hand my freedom over to an HOA that didn't even legally control my property. What followed was intimidation, surveillance, harassment, and eventually violence but I wasn't alone. My K9, my shotgun, and eventually the sheriff himself all played a role in what happened next. And trust me, this story does not end the way anyone expected. Homeownership is supposed to mean peace. You work hard, you save. You finally buy your little piece of land where you can build, live, and breathe without someone telling you how to cut your grass, what color to paint your shutters, or where you can park your truck. But in modern America, HOAs, homeowners associations, have become a nightmare for millions. They're meant to maintain property values, but what they really do is police people's lives. They dictate how long your trash cans can sit out. They fine you for leaving holiday decorations up a day too long. They sue you for planting the wrong flowers, and they'll even send enforcers, real or imagined, to bully you into compliance. I never thought I'd be on their radar. My home isn't even technically inside their jurisdiction. I bought my land years before the subdivision around me existed. But when a new HOA expanded nearby, they decided I was fair game. According to them, my property benefited from their oversight and should contribute financially. Translation: they wanted my money, my control, and my obedience. When I refused, things escalated fast. This isn't just about me. It's about anyone who's ever stood their ground against an overreaching authority. It's about the principle that your home is your castle, and no self-appointed neighbor, no board, no committee should be able to dictate what you do behind your own gate. Over the next few hours, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, from the first strange signs that something wasn't right, to the creeping sense that I was being watched, to the late-night confrontations that forced me to defend my home with everything I had. This isn't fiction. This is real, and by the end of it, you'll understand why the words HOA, Karen, sent a shiver down my spine, and why, when the sheriff finally got involved, the entire neighborhood would never be the same. It all started with a letter. One afternoon, tucked inside my mailbox, I found an envelope stamped with the HOA's crest. It was written in the usual bureaucratic jargon, demanding that I attend their next meeting to discuss terms of community integration. I tossed it straight into the trash. My land deed was clear. No HOA, but a week later another letter arrived. This one wasn't as polite. It said I was out of compliance with community standards because of my unpaved driveway and lack of approved fencing. It included a fine of $250. That's when I knew this wasn't a mistake. They were targeting me. I called the number on the letter. A woman answered, Karen, the HOA president. Her voice was sharp, condescending, like she was used to people folding under her authority. I told her flat out, "My land isn't part of your HOA, stop contacting me." She laughed. Actually laughed. Then she said something I'll never forget. "One way or another, you'll fall in line. Everyone does." That night I sat on my porch with my dog, Max. He's a trained German Shepherd, loyal, protective, the kind of dog you don't mess with. He sat at my feet, but every so often he'd perk up, ears forward, eyes fixed on the tree line, like he sensed something out there. The next morning, I noticed footprints along the edge of my property. Not mine, not Max's, fresh ones. Someone had been walking close to my fence line. Days later, I caught sight of a black SUV idling down the road. Same car, same tinted windows. Over and over. Whenever I walked toward it, it sped off. The tension was building. My land felt less like a home and more like a target. Then came the visit. It was late evening, just after sundown. I was inside when Max started growling. Deep, low, dangerous. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. That's when I saw them. 3 people standing at the end of my driveway. 2 men, 1 woman, strangers, they didn't move. They just watched me. I called out, "Can I help you?" One of the men smirked and said, "Karen sent us. You're gonna regret making this hard." Max barked furiously, pulling at his leash, teeth bared. I tightened my grip on the shotgun slung over my shoulder. The strangers backed off slowly, hands raised mockingly like they weren't scared. Then they disappeared into the dark. My heart pounded. This wasn't just letters or fines anymore. This was harassment, threats, and I knew it was only the beginning. For the next week, every night felt uneasy. I'd hear noises outside, branches snapping, gravel crunching, but when I shined my light, nothing. Max never rested, pacing, growling, always on edge. The letters kept coming too. The fines grew bigger. $500, $750. The threats clearer. Failure to comply will result in legal and personal consequences. It felt like I was in a war I never signed up for. And then, it escalated again. One night, well past midnight, Max exploded into barking. I grabbed my shotgun, heart pounding, and rushed outside. And that's when I saw them again, but this time, they weren't at the end of the driveway. They were inside my fence line, 3 shadows moving through my yard. Slow, intentional. Max lunged toward them, teeth flashing. I chambered around, raised the barrel, and shouted into the night, "Stop right there." The figures froze. One of them muttered, "He's serious." I was dead serious, and that's where part 1 leaves us. I had a split second to decide on, do I fire a warning shot? Do I release Max? Do I confront them head on? Whatever choice I made next would decide everything, because those intruders weren't just trespassers. They were messengers, and the real fight with Karen's HOA was only about to begin. The night I caught those 3 shadows inside my fence line, my blood went cold. My shotgun was raised. Max was snarling like he was ready to tear them apart. And for a moment, just a moment, I wondered if they were stupid enough to keep walking closer. They didn't. The one in the front muttered something, turned around, and the other 2 followed. They slipped back into the dark woods behind my property, their footsteps fading, leaving only silence and my pounding heartbeat. But here's the thing. That moment wasn't an ending. It was a warning shot from their side, a test. They wanted me to know, we can get to you whenever we want. When the sun came up, I walked the fence line with Max at my side. Clear as day, there were boot prints in the dirt. Heavy, deep, at least 3 different patterns. They'd been inside, close to my house. I grabbed my phone, took photos, and called the sheriff's office. The deputy who answered didn't sound particularly interested. "Did they damage anything?" he asked. "No," I said, "but they trespassed." "Well," he sighed, "trespassing's hard to prove unless we catch them in the act. Got any cameras?" That's when it hit me. I didn't. I'd lived out here for years without ever needing surveillance. My neighbors were acres away, good folks. I'd never had a problem. Until the HOA moved in. That day I went into town and bought 4 motion-activated cameras. By the time the sun set, they were mounted. 1 on the driveway, 1 on the back fence, 1 near the shed, and 1 on the porch facing the tree line. It felt like a line in the sand. If they came back, I'd have proof. 2 days later, proof arrived. Not on my cameras, but on my doorstep. I was sipping coffee when I heard tires crunching down the gravel drive. I stepped outside and saw a white SUV with the HOA logo stenciled on the door. Out stepped Karen herself. If you've never met an HOA queen bee, let me paint the picture. Mid-50s, crisp polo shirt tucked into khakis, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. The type who looks at you like she's already judged your worth and found you guilty. She didn't even smile. She just walked up to my porch and said, "We need to talk." Max growled. I said, "Stay behind the gate." She crossed her arms. "You've been ignoring our letters. You're in violation of multiple community codes. And if you think you can scare my volunteers with your dog and your gun, you're making a serious mistake." Her tone wasn't just aggressive, and it was personal. I told her flat out, "My land isn't under your HOA. You've got no authority here. If you send people on my property again, that's trespassing, and I'll treat it as such." Karen tilted her head, smirked, and said, "We'll see about that." Then she got back in her SUV and drove off, dust swirling behind her. That night, one of my new cameras caught the same black SUV I'd seen before, parking at the end of my road. Headlights off, sitting there, It didn't stop. Every few nights I'd catch movement on the cameras, figures pacing along the fence line, sometimes just standing there, not trying to break in, not vandalizing, just watching, like predators testing their prey, and the letters kept coming too. Bigger fines, legal threats, claims that they'd put a lien on my property. I took every letter and stacked them in a folder. My plan was to bring it all to the sheriff if things went further, but what I didn't know then was how fast further was coming. One evening, I pulled into my driveway after a long day of work and found my mailbox smashed flat. Post cracked in half. Max leapt out of the truck before I could stop him, barking wildly at the woods. I followed his gaze and saw movement and someone running, vanishing between the trees. That night I filed an official report. The deputy finally came out, took photos, and listened to everything I'd been dealing with. He shook his head and said, "Sounds like they're trying to intimidate you. Keep your cameras rolling, and call us right away if it happens again." Not exactly comforting. The lowest point came a week later. I woke up early to let Max out. He bounded into the yard like always, full of energy, but minutes later he staggered back toward the porch, whining, his paw bleeding. I rushed to him, heart racing, and found a piece of jagged wire tangled in his fur. Someone had laid a strip of barbed wire along the inside of my fence line, deliberately placed where Max ran every morning. I saw red, pure rage. Whoever was doing this wasn't just trying to scare me anymore. They were trying to hurt my dog. I treated Max's wound, then pulled every inch of that wire from the fence line. My hands were shaking the whole time. That night I sat on the porch with the shotgun across my lap. No sleep, no peace. Just waiting, and around 2 a.m. the cameras lit up, 3 men. The same ones from before. Walking straight up the driveway. This time I didn't shout. I didn't warn. I stepped into the yard, racked the shotgun, and aimed. Max snarled at my side. The men froze about 30 yards away. One of them raised his hand, smirking. "Easy, man. We're just here to talk." "Then talk from there," I said. "Karen says you've got 2 options. Join the association and pay your dues, or—" He let the silence hang, his grin spreading. "You deal with us until you change your mind." I pulled the trigger, a warning shot into the air. The blast echoed through the night. Max barked like thunder. The men cursed, stumbled back, then bolted into the dark. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Karen's voice. Calm. Cold. That was a mistake. Then she hung up. The next morning, I marched straight into the sheriff's office with my folder of letters, my camera footage, and the barbed wire I'd pulled from my yard. This time, I didn't get a shrug. The sheriff himself sat me down, reviewed everything, and said, "Looks like you've got a case. If they step foot on your property again, you've got every right to defend yourself. And I'll be having a talk with this HOA president." For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe the tide was turning, but Karen wasn't done. A few nights later, the cameras caught something new. A figure near my shed, crouched low, planting something in the dirt. I grabbed the shotgun and Max and rushed out. By the time I got there, the figure was gone. But in the soil, right by the shed wall, I found a small plastic bag. Inside, a handful of pills. They were trying to set me up. If the sheriff had come by unannounced and found drugs on my property, I'd be the criminal. Not them. That's when I realized Karen and her crew weren't just petty bullies. They were dangerous. They'd crossed from harassment into something darker. The pressure didn't let up. Night after night, more figures on the cameras. More fines in the mail. More threats whispered in the dark. I couldn't live like this anymore. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I mapped out the property, checked the cameras, set up motion lights, and started patrolling every night with Max at my side. I wasn't just defending anymore. I was preparing for a war, and that war came sooner than I thought. One night, the cameras picked up something different. Not 3 men, not a car, but a group. 5, maybe 6 figures moving fast down the driveway. This wasn't intimidation. This wasn't a warning. This was an attack. I gripped the shotgun tighter. Max barked furiously, and as the figures closed in, my phone lit up with a single text from an unknown number. "Tonight it ends." That night, when the cameras showed 5 or 6 figures marching down my driveway, I knew the HOA wasn't just playing games anymore. This was it, their final move. Max was at the door, fur bristling, barking with every ounce of his strength. I loaded the shotgun, heart pounding so hard it felt like it shook the floor beneath me. The figures moved closer, spreading out like they'd practiced. Flashlights flickered across my yard. I counted 6 of them. All men. One called out, "Come on out, neighbor. Let's talk." But his tone wasn't neighborly. It was a threat dressed in fake calm. I yelled back, "You've got 5 seconds to leave my property." Silence. Then laughter. One of them shouted, "You think that mud and that shotgun scare us? Karen wants this done tonight." Max lunged against the door. I swung it open and he bolted out, teeth bared, charging straight toward the group. They froze, caught off guard by the sheer fury of 90 pounds of trained German Shepherd flying at them. One man stumbled back, tripped, and fell. Another raised something, a metal pipe, like he was ready to swing. That's when I fired. The shotgun blast tore through the night, echoing like thunder. I aimed high deliberately. A warning shot, but close enough that the gravel at their feet exploded. The group scattered, shouting curses. But they didn't run far. They regrouped at the edge of the driveway, weapons glinting in the light. I racked the shotgun again, adrenaline flooding me. "Next one's not a warning," I shouted, and then, headlights 2 sets barreling up the gravel road. The thugs turned, surprised. The beams lit them up, exposing their faces for the first time. I didn't recognize them, but they weren't random. They were hired. Brought here with a purpose. The vehicles stopped. Doors slammed, and out stepped the sheriff and 2 deputies, guns drawn. "Sheriff's Department. Drop your weapons." The HOA's muscle froze. Max circled them, growling, teeth flashing. I kept my shotgun raised, finger steady. One by one, the men dropped what they were holding, pipes, bats, even a crowbar. The deputies moved in, cuffing them one at a time while the sheriff approached me. "You all right?" he asked. I nodded, still shaking. "They came here to finish it." The sheriff glanced at the thugs, then back at me. "We've been getting reports all week. You're not the only one they've been leaning on, but looks like you're the first who fought back." That's when I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself. Karen had been terrorizing other homeowners too. People who were too scared to stand up, too intimidated to resist. But tonight, with cameras rolling, weapons drawn, and the sheriff himself watching, the truth was finally out. The deputies hauled the thugs into the vehicles. The sheriff promised charges would follow: trespassing, intimidation, possibly even conspiracy. And as the dust settled, Max sat at my side, chest heaving, eyes locked on the tree line as if daring anyone else to try. The war wasn't over yet, because Karen herself wasn't in cuffs. But the tide had turned. The next morning, the sheriff called me back into town. In his office sat a folder thicker than mine, dozens of complaints from other residents. Anonymous tips, reports of harassment, fines that weren't enforceable, threats whispered late at night. Karen's HOA had been running a campaign of fear across the whole neighborhood. I wasn't the first target. I was just the loudest. With the footage from my cameras, the evidence of the attack, and the testimonies piling up, the sheriff said it was enough to open a formal investigation. Days later, I watched from my porch as that same white SUV rolled down the street. Only this time it wasn't Karen behind the wheel. It was a deputy, seizing records from the HOA office. Word spread fast. Neighbors who had been silent started sharing their stories. Some had been fined thousands for non-compliance. Others had been told their homes could be foreclosed if they didn't join voluntarily. It was extortion, plain and simple. Karen was eventually arrested. The charges? Fraud, harassment, conspiracy, and misuse of funds. Turns out the dues she was demanding weren't going toward community improvements at all. They were lining her pockets and paying for the thugs she sent to my property. When it was all over, I stood in my yard with Max at my side, shotgun resting in the crook of my arm, and felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. The mailbox was repaired. The cameras stayed up. But the silence, that was the real gift. No more letters. No more shadows in the night. No more threats. It was over. And in the end, I learned something powerful. Home isn't just about land or buildings. It's about freedom. The right to stand your ground, to say no when someone tries to take what isn't theirs, to protect what you've worked for with everything you've got. Max healed up, strong as ever. The sheriff still waves when he drives by. And me, I sleep with both eyes closed again. If you've made it this far, you've lived this story with me. Every letter, every threat, every sleepless night, every shotgun shell and sheriff's siren, and maybe you felt it too. That sense of injustice when someone with power tries to take what isn't theirs. Maybe you fought your own battles with an HOA, a boss, a neighbor, or anyone who thought they could push you around.